tied up in it at the moment, and if IFA comes on stream, which it should, another 20,000 at least will be brought in when it comes into production. Without it, it's basically the beginning of the end of the high-tech sector of the British engineering industry.
With the debate over IFA focused largely on the industrial issues, it's forged an unusual alliance of all the main political parties, including Labour, solidly behind the new high-tech weapon.
I say the aerospace industry, which was born in Britain, which was pioneered in Britain, which grew in Britain, must stay and must stay strong in Britain.
The Shadow Chancellor told the marchers that the government ought to be playing a much bigger role in industry.
What this country needs is a policy for British industry. We need not just a policy for our traditional industries, important as they are. We need a policy for our high technology industries on which our future depends.
Here at Wharton in Lancashire is where British Aerospace makes the Tornado. This one's being wheeled out for flight trials. Military aircraft like these are the core of the group, which is both Britain's largest manufacturer and our biggest exporter. They've been making military aircraft here ever since the Second World War and have built up a wealth of specialist expertise. And this is where IFA is due to come into production, taking up the slack as Tornado production comes to an end.
The last new build Tornado aircraft is delivered from this site this year, and we already have a gap or a mismatch in the continuity. There would be a disruption if IFA was delayed. Cancellation of IFA completely would be disastrous to the North West and to British Aerospace.
For John Weston, the man who runs British Aerospace's defence business, IFA is central to the future of his part of the company, and even delays in the project would be damaging.
At the moment, our military aircraft business is one of the cornerstones of our defence business. And ultimately, if we don't have a high-performance aeroplane in the inventory, such as IFA, then we would be on our way out of that business. But it would be a long-term effect.
And what are the consequences of a delay then?
Well, the consequences of a delay is we would actually have to manage a highly skilled workforce down in numbers and then back up with numbers, which is obviously an expensive proposition that we prefer to avoid.
But some suppliers to British Aerospace on IFA are already being affected by the uncertainty because it makes it so difficult to plan ahead. This lorry is arriving at the Hyde Group down the road in Lancashire. Hyde makes sophisticated precision tools for the aerospace industry. This one's for moulding the foreplanes on IFA, but it's one of the last of the present batch. Further orders now will depend on IFA moving on to full production from the present development stage.
We know historically that Hyde Group has always been used by the major aircraft manufacturers for a certain proportion of that business. So we have something firm to go to the banks with and to make a business plan on. Whilst there is no definitive programme there, the banks are a little more reluctant to accept that you have a base on which to invest.
So the uncertainty is disruptive?
It's disruptive in many respects. It's disruptive in manpower planning, in investment planning, and in financing the business overall.
This high-tech electronics company in Sussex is a specialist defence contractor, heavily involved in the IFA programme, which now accounts for a quarter of its business. Here they are making very advanced circuit boards, part of the aircraft's electronic brains.
In fact, that circuit board there is a computer from IFA, one of the IFA black boxes, and in fact it replaces this black box here, which is from the Tornado reconnaissance system.
But the company is concerned that it's become too focused on the defence industry. With defence spending falling, it's been looking at ways of using technology spin-off from its defence work to diversify into other areas. Civil applications for audio electronics are one possible route.
Another example is taking the weapon systems on aircraft, which are safety critical, and applying that philosophy to the door opening systems on trains, for example, where, of course, that is also safety critical. You do not want the doors to open at the wrong time just as you do not want a weapon to fall from an aircraft at the wrong time.
So worried are the captains of the aerospace industry, meeting here at their trade association, about the uncertainty over EFA, that they've set up a special lobby group to put the industry's case. It's headed by Air Vice Marshal Tony Mason.
Whatever decisions are made about EFA, they are made in possession of every conceivable fact and figure. Those in terms of the industrial base, those in terms of the security requirement, the export potential, the whole.
Another of their arguments is that without the military programs like EFA, the industry, a world leader ranking number 3 after the US and Russia, would eventually lose its technological edge.
The technology driver in the aerospace business comes very much out of the defence and the military side. I mean, a lot of the new design technologies that we are building into EFA will begin to appear in commercial aircraft in 10 or 12 years' time. If we don't have that benefit of the technology flow through, there will come a time in 10, 15 or 20 years when the European industry would have difficulty in competing with the American industry, where those linkages are still very strong.
The Defence Secretary was visiting Rolls-Royce last week, where EFA's engines are made. He insists that while his department may be manufacturing industry's biggest customer, his priority is defence and not industrial policy.
I would not defend EFA or any other major item of our procurement programme simply because of the job implications or the industrial opportunities. My duty is to identify what are the needs, the minimum needs of our armed forces in order to carry out the responsibilities we give them. If, as a byproduct of that, that also creates major employment opportunities, good export opportunities, significant economic growth in the areas concerned, that is highly desirable and something also to be welcomed.
With so much at stake, Britain's Ministry of Defence has made clear it's determined to go ahead with EFA, and the shape of the project should become clearer when defence ministers from the 4 nations meet again in December. They'll be discussing 2 new reports, one taking a fresh look at the defence case for EFA, the other spelling out the scope for cost cuts. At the moment, there's every sign that Germany's defence minister will find his arguments against the project seriously undermined by the 2 reports, and he'll end up being forced back into a compromise with the other EFA partners. With work well advanced on the first EFA prototypes, it's already clear from one of the studies that big cost savings of up to 30% are possible. This should help meet one of Germany's main objections, as well as reassuring other partners under budgetary pressures. Some cost savings could come from cutting back on equipment, some from simply streamlining 4-nation production of the plane.
The economic savings by going for a 4-nation programme in the first place are so large you can probably afford some small inefficiencies in order to achieve some other goals like technology transfer. I think into the current environment, minimum cost has become the main driving element, and that has enabled us to make some very sensible decisions about how we would rationalise some of the production arrangements.
By putting the spotlight on the costs of EFA, which was developed from this earlier experimental plane, Mr. Ruhr may have done everyone a favour. But his argument that the plane's too sophisticated in the post-Cold War era and it would be better to make a cheaper alternative is finding less favour with his counterparts.
The alternatives to EFA are more expensive, and that's not surprising because we've already spent £5 billion worth, particularly on the engines and the aeroframe. If you don't use the results of that work, inevitably the cost would go up, not go down.
I think perhaps we can best see that by looking at some graphs.
Experts like Trevor Taylor from Chatham House, who've been examining the figures, say that even compared to other aircraft on the market, like the French Rafale, the Swedish Gripen, or the US F-22, EFA represents the best value for money.
And you can see that with EFA at 1, it's considerably more cost-effective than its first rival, which is the F-22. The Rafale and the Gripen are both considerably, if you like, further down the curve. And that's because they are much less capable aircraft in the air-to-air roles in which the Germans are particularly interested.
Germany's defence ministry has also found that it would face heavy financial penalties under the 4-nation agreement if it simply pulls out of developing EFA. Another reason it's no longer talking of withdrawal. But the prospect of some delay in the project is now being aired by the EFA partners.
Our German colleagues have made it clear that they wish to continue with the development phase of the program. I think we will need to have some quite serious discussions about the timescale. Over what period of time is this project going to be taken forward? How will we manage the costs? And all countries, not just Germany, have reducing defence budgets. We all are anxious to get the maximum economy. So there's a lot of mutual interest involved, and I think that should provide a basis for good progress.
It's quite apparent that the British government does not want to cause Volker Ruhr any more than the minimum embarrassment about a German position which would accept a modified EFA. Indeed, there is awareness that we need to provide him with some graceful way to accept it.
But back in Germany, Mr. Ruhr's biggest problem may be whether he can win enough concessions from his EFA partners to sell a compromise to the public back home.
His dilemma is that the normal citizens of Germany who have heard what he had promised them believe that EFA is dead. It will not be built for the German Air Force. On the other side, the contracts which were made before Mr. Ruhr became in his office are so clear that Germany has no chance to save money if they go unilateral out of the treaties.
And is he a good enough politician to get out of this corner?
Let's see. Perhaps he will find a way to explain to the people that the EFA is a new EFA or another EFA, or perhaps they give them another name.
I frankly don't mind whether it's called EFA Light, EFA, or some totally new name. What's in a name? The important thing is to actually ensure that the needs of our four air forces and of European defence generally are met in a satisfactory way for the next generation.
Whatever the defence arguments for and against the European fighter aircraft, industry is crying out for decisions. With evidence mounting that Volker Ruhr is now prepared to compromise, no one is ruling out the possibility of fresh surprises. But those involved are keeping their fingers crossed that some kind of deal can be struck to keep EFA firing.
BBC Select is the BBC's new subscription service, offering specialist professional, training and education programmes which complement existing BBC channels. Accountancy Television is a flexible new service for accounting professionals, with 60 minutes of up-to-date news, information and training each week. Developed by the profession for the profession, Accountancy Television will keep you in touch with the latest technical and business developments and provide complimentary learning material. Free phone 0800 333 850 for more information about Accountancy Television from BBC Select.
Could romance be in the air for Nora Batty, or will be revealed in Last of the Summer Wine on BBC One shortly?
Culminating in the bitter vision of film noir, the years during and after the Second World War were among the most important in the history of Hollywood. Yet, just as the stars of one of the enduring classics from that era would be inseparable forever in the minds of the public, so too with their emphasis on repression would the Hitler and McCarthy eras. City of Strangers, Part 3 in 50 minutes.
First on 2, a new series begins as we follow the realms of the Russian bear through the forests and deserts of what was once the Soviet Union.